Some of you came here today carrying questions. Why did this happen to me? Why didn't things turn out the way I expected? You thought the job was yours. You thought the relationship would last. You thought the door would open. But when it closed, you felt broken, confused, maybe even abandoned. But hear me clearly. You are not abandoned. You are being aligned. The reason you need to stay with me until the very end is because by the time we're finished, you're going to stop mourning what you lost and start celebrating what God is preparing. What He's doing in your life is so much greater, so much bigger, so much higher than the plans you thought you had. And if you stay with me, you're going to walk out of here today, not just with answers, but with confidence in the author of your destiny. When we talk about broken plans, we are not speaking about small inconveniences, the kind of everyday mishaps that barely register. We are speaking about those moments in life that leave you shaken, the moments when you thought you had the road mapped out and the destination was within reach, only to find yourself standing in the rubble of what you thought was your future. Maybe it was the business you invested in that crumbled before your eyes. Maybe it was the marriage you thought would last a lifetime but ended in divorce papers. Maybe it was the acceptance letter you never received, the job interview that never called back, the door you were so certain God would open that slammed shut so hard you could still hear the echo. In that moment, you were left broken, confused, even angry, wondering why the God you trusted didn't make your plan succeed. But hear me now, those broken plans were not the end of your story. They were the beginning of God's blueprint. You see, while you were building with your limited perspective, God was already drafting with eternal precision. What felt like chaos to you was strategy to Him. When your plans fall apart, the natural reaction is to mourn. You cry, you question, you grieve what could have been. But the truth is that some things had to break in order for God to reveal what He had already prepared. The walls of Jericho had to fall before Israel could step into the promise. Sometimes what you thought was meant to stand forever was only meant to stand long enough to get you to the place where God could begin His greater work. You cannot see the blueprint while you are still clinging to the old structure. That's why God allows the tearing down. He knows that if He let your plan stand, it would block you from the vision He has for you. It is not that your plan was evil or foolish. It just wasn't divine. It wasn't complete. It didn't align with the eternal narrative that God has been writing over your life since before you were born. Think about it. If you had gotten everything you wanted when you wanted it, you would not have the capacity to handle it. The blessing would have become a burden because your character had not yet been prepared. Sometimes broken plans are the mercy of God. They keep you from building on faulty ground. They keep you from pouring energy into something that was never meant to carry you into your destiny. They keep you from mistaking temporary satisfaction for eternal fulfillment. God will let the scaffolding collapse so He can lay a foundation that cannot be shaken. And while you are crying over the loss of what you thought was your dream, He is quietly arranging every detail of a plan that is far more stable, far more secure, far more suited for the calling He placed inside you. The trouble with our plans is that they are always rooted in what we can see and what we can control. We choose based on comfort, based on familiarity, based on what feels safe. We set our eyes on what seems logical, what makes sense according to human understanding. But God's blueprint is drawn from a completely different dimension. He sees where you are, but He also sees where you are going. He sees the future connections you don't know about yet, the people you haven't met, the opportunities that haven't even been created. He is designing not only for your present convenience, but for your future capacity. And sometimes the only way to break you out of your limited view is to let your plan break apart so He can build something new. The disappointment was necessary to disrupt your dependence on what you thought you could control. Consider Joseph in the book of Genesis. His plan might have been to live out his days as the favored son, wearing the coat of many colors, basking in his father's affection. That was his plan, but God's blueprint was so much bigger. His brother's betrayal, the pit, the prison, all of those broken plans were actually bricks in the foundation of his destiny. Every betrayal, every false accusation, every lonely night was God's way of constructing a platform for Joseph to stand on. The palace would not have been possible without the pit. The promotion would not have been possible without the prison. What Joseph thought was destruction was actually direction. His broken plan was the first draft of God's master design. In your own life, you may not see it now, but every shattered dream is making room for a divine assignment. Every door that closed is forcing you to turn toward a door you would never have considered if your first choice had worked out. Every relationship that failed is redirecting you toward the connections that align with your purpose. Every job that rejected you is setting you up for the work you were truly born to do. What feels like rejection is often redirection, and what feels like failure is really foundation. Your broken plan is not wasted, it is repurposed. God takes the fragments of what you lost and uses them as raw material for something greater than you could have pieced together on your own. This is why you cannot let brokenness make you bitter. Bitterness will blind you to the blueprint. If you stay stuck in mourning over the plan that didn't work, you'll miss the beauty of the plan that is unfolding. You'll miss the new relationships, the new opportunities, the new revelations that are waiting on the other side of your surrender. Broken plans are not an indication that God is absent. They are proof that God is active. He is tearing down what you thought you needed so he can give you what he always intended. He is dismantling the fragile so he can construct the unshakable. He is removing your script so he can reveal his story. When God delays something in your life, it can feel like the heavens have gone silent. You pray, you fast, you knock on every door, and yet the answer seems to linger in the distance, just out of reach. It feels as if everyone around you is moving forward while you are stuck in the waiting room of life. You start to wonder if God forgot about you, if maybe your prayers were lost in the shuffle, if perhaps you've done something wrong to disqualify yourself from his blessing. The delay becomes a test not only of your patience but of your faith, because in those moments it is easy to confuse delay with denial. Yet the truth is that divine delays are not evidence of God's absence. They are evidence of his orchestration. He is not saying no, he is saying not yet. He is holding you in place not to punish you but to prepare you for what he has already ordained. The problem is that we live in a world that worships immediacy. We want everything now, instant answers, instant results, instant gratification. But the kingdom of God does not operate on human schedules. God's timing is eternal, and his timing is intentional. When he delays, it is never by accident. Every second of waiting has a purpose attached to it. Just as a farmer cannot rush the harvest but must wait for the appointed season, so too must we learn to wait on God's timing. A premature harvest would destroy the fruit, and a premature blessing can destroy the person. God delays because he knows what you cannot yet see. He knows that if you stepped into that opportunity too soon, it would crush you. He knows that if he gave you what you're asking for before you are ready, the very thing you prayed for would become the thing that breaks you. So he holds it back until the moment you can carry it without collapsing. Think about the story of Lazarus. When Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus that their brother was sick, they expected him to come immediately. They wanted him to show up right away and heal Lazarus before death could touch him. But Jesus delayed. He waited until Lazarus had died and had been in the tomb 4 days. To Mary and Martha, that delay looked like denial. They cried, "Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died." They assumed that his lateness was evidence of his neglect, but what they did not know was that his delay was divinely designed. If he had arrived when they wanted, Lazarus would have been healed, but because he delayed, Lazarus was resurrected. Healing would have revealed his power, but resurrection revealed his glory. Sometimes God delays not because he is ignoring you, but because he is setting the stage for a greater revelation. What feels like a setback is really a setup for him to display his glory in a way that would never have been possible if he had answered on your timeline. In your own life, the delay might not make sense now. You might feel like Martha and Mary, crying out with confusion and disappointment. You thought God would show up last year, last month, last week. You thought by now the business would have taken off, the relationship would have come together, the healing would have manifested. But every time you check, the tomb is still sealed and the dream still looks dead. Yet in that delay, delay, God is positioning everything so that when he finally moves, it will be undeniable that it was his hand and not yours that brought it to pass. The longer the delay, the greater the testimony. The longer the wait, the bigger the breakthrough. Divine delays are also training grounds for character. Waiting has a way of shaping you in ways success never could. Waiting develops endurance, and endurance produces maturity. It is in the waiting that you learn discipline. It is in the waiting that you learn to trust God even when nothing seems to be happening. It is in the waiting that you learn to worship him for who he is, not just for what he does. The delay strips you of entitlement and teaches you dependence. If God gave you everything instantly, you would never grow roots. You would never learn to stand in faith. You would never discover the strength that only emerges when everything in you wants to give up, but you choose to hold on anyway. Waiting is the soil where deep faith is planted, and when the blessing finally comes, it will not just be about the gift, it will be about the growth that happened in you while you waited. And while you are waiting, God is working. Just because you cannot see it does not mean it is not happening. Behind the scenes, God is aligning people, arranging circumstances, moving obstacles, and orchestrating timing. He is like a master conductor preparing the instruments for the perfect moment when the symphony will begin. If you stepped in too soon, the music would be incomplete, the harmony unfinished. But when God finally gives the signal, everything will come together in such a way that you will realize the delay was not wasted time. It was necessary time. Every day you thought was lost was actually invested in the fulfillment of the plan. Look at Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but 25 years passed before Isaac was born. 25 years of waiting, 25 years of questioning, 25 years of wondering if the promise would ever come. But God was not late. Isaac was born exactly when God intended, in the fullness of time. The delay was not denial, it was destiny unfolding. God's promise is not like human promises. His word cannot return void. If he said it, he will do it. The only question is whether you can endure the space between the promise spoken and the promise fulfilled. That space is the delay, but the delay is divine. When we speak of God's plan exceeding your imagination, we are not dealing with shallow cliches or motivational slogans. We are dealing with the truth that the Creator of heaven and earth has thoughts, strategies, and intentions for your life that stretch far beyond the limits of your mind. Your imagination is powerful, but it is still confined by what you have seen, heard, or experienced. You imagine based on memory, but God plans based on eternity. You imagine based on the fragments of what you know, but God designs based on the fullness of what he has already prepared. That is why Scripture reminds us that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no human mind has conceived what God has in store for those who love him. Your greatest vision, your most ambitious dream, your wildest plan still falls short of the magnitude of his intention. Most of us measure life by our environment and our exposure. If you grew up in lack, you dream of just having enough. If you grew up around broken relationships, you imagine something slightly better, but still within the frame of what you have witnessed. If your career, your family, or your health has always been limited by obstacles, your dreams will be framed by those boundaries. You think in terms of survival when God is planning in terms of abundance. You think in terms of making it through the storm while God is planning in terms of teaching you how to walk on water. You imagine being free from the chains of yesterday while God is planning to position you as a liberator for others who are still bound. The gap between your imagination and his plan is vast, and often the reason he has to break your plans is because they are too small compared to what he has destined. Consider the disciples before Jesus called them. Most of them were fishermen, tax collectors, ordinary men with ordinary expectations. Their imagination was limited to catching enough fish to feed their families or collecting enough taxes to maintain their livelihood. But when Jesus stepped into their lives, he revealed a plan that was far greater. Instead of catching fish, they would become fishers of men. Instead of handling coins, they would handle kingdoms. Instead of living out quiet, unrecorded lives, they would be written into the eternal story of redemption, their names forever remembered as pillars of the church. Nothing in their wildest dreams could have prepared them for the magnitude of what God was calling them into. And the same is true for you. You may be working a job, managing a household, simply trying to get by, but God's plan has layers that reach far beyond the daily grind. He is weaving you into a story that is much larger than your personal goals. One of the reasons God's plan exceeds your imagination is because He takes into account not only your desires, but your destiny. You may desire comfort, stability, and ease, but destiny demands growth, challenge, and stretching. If God only gave you what you wanted, you would remain the same, confined to the box of your own imagination. But because His plan is greater, He leads you into places you never thought you could go, equips you for battles you never thought you could fight, and entrusts you with blessings you never thought you could handle. The magnitude of His plan is designed not just to satisfy you, but to glorify Him. And in glorifying Him, it lifts you into dimensions you could never have entered on your own. Think about David. As a shepherd boy, his imagination may have extended to being a good caretaker of his father's sheep. He probably dreamed of protecting the flock, providing for his family, maybe marrying, maybe building a quiet life. But God's plan was to raise him up as a king. He was not only destined to rule Israel, but to become the lineage through which the Messiah would come. There was no way David's young mind could have pictured the throne, the crown, or the Psalms that would echo for thousands of years. His imagination was limited to the pasture, but God's plan carried him to the palace. This is the same God who is ordering your steps. He sees in you potential you cannot fathom, and He positions you in ways that don't make sense to your current mind because He is operating from a vision that far surpasses your comprehension. God's plan also exceeds your imagination because it connects to generations beyond you. Your imagination often stops with your own lifetime, but God's plan stretches into eternity. What He is doing in your life is not only for you, it is for your children, your grandchildren, your community, and even people you may never meet. You may think you are simply working a job, but God may be using that platform to influence lives you do not even know are watching you. You may think you are just surviving an illness, but God may be using your testimony to spark faith in someone else years down the line. You may think you are simply enduring a difficult season, but God may be producing something in you that will outlive you. His plan always multiplies beyond the scope of your personal vision. This is why it is dangerous to underestimate yourself based on your current condition. Where you are now is not the measure of where God intends to take you. Your imagination is confined by present circumstances, but God's plan is rooted in eternal possibilities. What you call impossible, He calls inevitable. What you call too big, He calls just the beginning. What you call overwhelming, He calls ordained. And even when you cannot trace the steps, you can trust the outcome, because the one who designed the plan is too wise to make mistakes and too loving to lead you astray. Pain is one of the most misunderstood experiences of human life. Most of us spend our days trying to avoid it, suppress it, or escape it, believing that pain is a sign of God's absence, or worse, His punishment. Yet if you look closely at the stories of Scripture, at the lives of the people God used most powerfully, you will see a consistent pattern. Pain was never wasted, and pain was never random. Pain was the very soil where purpose was planted. It was in the furnace of affliction that faith was forged. In the valleys of sorrow that vision was sharpened. In the seasons of crushing that calling was clarified. Pain, as brutal as it feels, often becomes the unexpected bridge that carries you from where you are to where God intended you to be. Without pain, you would stay in the shallow waters of comfort, never venturing into the depths of your true assignment. Think about Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, betrayed by those who should have protected him, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, forgotten by the cupbearer in prison. If you were to look at his life at any single moment in those painful seasons, you would think he was cursed. Yet every betrayal was positioning him. Every prison was preparing him. Every moment of pain was pulling him closer to his purpose as a leader who would save nations from famine. Without the pain, Joseph would have never left his father's house, never entered Egypt, never been elevated to the palace. His purpose was waiting, but it was pain that paved the road to get there. Pain has a way of stripping away illusions. When everything is going smoothly, you can be deceived into thinking you are self-sufficient, into believing you don't need God's strength, into assuming that your plans are enough. But pain shatters those illusions. Pain forces you to confront your weakness. Pain drives you to your knees when pride would have kept you standing. Pain opens your eyes to the reality that you are not in control. And in that moment of brokenness, you discover the presence of God in ways you never would have experienced otherwise. The oil only flows when the olive is crushed, and the fragrance only releases when the spice is ground. In the same way, the true power of your purpose often emerges only when the crushing of life squeezes it out of you. Consider the story of Hannah, barren and ridiculed, living with the shame of unfulfilled desire. Year after year she wept, prayed, and waited, until one day in her anguish she poured out her soul before the Lord in such a way that even the priest thought she was drunk. Her pain birthed a prayer that pierced heaven, and God answered with Samuel, a prophet who would anoint kings and shape the destiny of Israel. Had Hannah never endured that season of pain, she may never have prayed with such desperation, and Samuel may never have been born. Pain birthed purpose not only for her, but for an entire nation. Pain also teaches empathy in ways nothing else can. When you've walked through sorrow, you become tender toward the sorrows of others. When you've battled sickness, you learn to weep with those who are sick. When you've carried the weight of loss, you learn how to comfort others who mourn. The very pain you resented becomes the tool God uses to make you usable for his people. Paul speaks of the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our troubles, so that we may comfort others with the same comfort we received. Your pain equips you to be a vessel of healing for someone else. What broke you becomes the very thing that allows you to build others back up. There is also a hidden discipline in pain. It refines motives, strengthens character, and toughens resolve. Without pain, your purpose would remain shallow, untested, easily swayed by opposition. But pain anchors you. Pain teaches endurance. Pain gives you scars that serve as reminders of what you've survived, proof that you can overcome, evidence that you can't be shaken easily. A person who has been through pain carries an authority that no classroom can teach and no textbook can supply. They speak not from theory, but from testimony, not from imagination, but from experience. And that authority is often essential to fulfilling the purpose God has placed on your life. Even Jesus himself, the very Son of God, fulfilled his ultimate purpose through pain. The cross was not an accident or an afterthought. It was the pathway through which salvation came to humanity. Every nail driven, every thorn pressed, every lash received was painful beyond comprehension, but it was also purposeful beyond imagination. Through his wounds came our healing. Through his suffering came our redemption. If the perfect, sinless Son of God had to walk through pain to fulfill his divine purpose, how much more should we expect that pain will be part of our journey toward destiny? Pain does not mean God has abandoned you. It often means you are closer to his plan than you realize. And though pain feels like a detour, it is often the direct route. You may have prayed for God to use you, to reveal your calling, to open doors of influence, and then suddenly pain erupts in your life. What if the very thing you thought was blocking your purpose is the very thing birthing it? What if the sickness that slowed you down was the classroom where you learned compassion? What if the heartbreak that shattered you was the mirror that revealed your true strength? What if the disappointment you thought would destroy you was the soil that birthed resilience, humility, and faith? The pathway to purpose is rarely paved with ease. It is usually marked with the footprints of those who walked through pain and discovered that the fire did not consume them, it refined them. Closed doors are some of the most difficult experiences to process in life. When you have prayed, prepared, and positioned yourself for an opportunity and the door suddenly slams shut, it feels like rejection. It feels like abandonment. It feels like God overlooked you or even turned his back on you. We cry, Lord, why didn't you let that work out? Why didn't you give me what I asked for? Why didn't you open the way when I was so ready? But what if that closed door wasn't a punishment? What if it was protection? What if the very thing you were weeping over, the very opportunity you were mourning, was something that God had to keep from you because it would have destroyed you if you had walked through it? Sometimes God loves you too much to say yes. Sometimes the no is the mercy, the refusal is the rescue, and the closed door is the shield that keeps you from harm you cannot see. Closed doors protect you from counterfeit blessings. Not every open opportunity is God ordained. Some doors are traps dressed up as treasures. Some connections look like destiny but are really distractions. Some promotions look like favor but are secretly snares that would derail your calling. You cannot always discern what is behind the door. To your eyes, it may look like the perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect investment, the perfect chance to finally step into success. But God, who sees the end from the beginning, knows that behind that door lies heartache, disappointment, or destruction. So he closes it. He lets the application be rejected. He lets the call never come. He lets the relationship end. Not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much to let you walk into something that would cost you more than you could afford. Closed doors also redirect your steps toward what you were truly created for. Sometimes we set our hearts on things that are beneath the level of what God has prepared. We settle for safe, for small, for convenient, because it looks achievable. But God knows you were built for more. He knows the gifts he placed inside of you, the influence he designed you to carry, the legacy he ordained for you to leave. So he closes doors to keep you from settling in places that don't match your destiny. The rejection is often redirection. That door you thought was the only way forward may have been a detour, and God had to block it so you would turn toward the path he has truly designed. Think about Paul on his missionary journeys. In the book of Acts, he wanted to preach the gospel in Asia, but scripture says the Holy Spirit forbade him from entering. To Paul, that must have been confusing. Preaching the gospel is a good thing, so why would God close that door? But shortly after, Paul received a vision of a man from Macedonia calling for help. That closed door in Asia redirected Paul into Europe, which became one of the most significant expansions of the early church. The closed door was not denial, it was divine protection and redirection toward a greater assignment. What looked like a block was really a breakthrough waiting in another direction. Closed doors also protect your timing. Even a good door can become a dangerous door if you walk through it too early. Timing is as important as opportunity. You may have the gifting, the passion, the vision, but if you don't yet have the maturity or the preparation to sustain it, that opportunity can destroy you. Many people fall not because they were never called, but because they stepped through a door before the season was right. God knows this. He knows the weight of the responsibility on the other side of that door, and he knows whether you are ready to carry it. So sometimes he keeps it locked until you are strong enough, wise enough, and humble enough to handle what is waiting. The closed door protects you from premature exposure, from crushing pressure, from carrying a crown before you have endured the process of refinement. Closed doors are also the way God teaches us trust. If every door opened the moment you knocked, you would never develop the faith to believe when things don't go your way. Closed doors stretch your faith muscles. They force you to lean on God instead of leaning on your own understanding. They push you into prayer, into fasting, into deeper dependence on his guidance. The door that shuts in your face may be the very tool God uses to draw you closer to his presence. And while you may not see it in the moment, later you will look back and realize that his refusal was the most loving thing he could have done for you. Think about relationships. Some of the deepest scars people carry are from connections they thought were right, only to discover later they were toxic, destructive, or even dangerous. Yet how many more scars would we have if God had allowed every relationship we wanted to work out? Every closed door in relationships is often God's hand of protection. The person you thought would love you forever might have been the very person to break your spirit. The connection you thought would elevate you might have been the one to bury you. Closed doors in relationships may feel devastating, but they are often divine rescues. Closed doors even shape your testimony. When God shuts something down, it becomes a marker in your life that you can point back to later and say, I didn't understand then, but now I see why that door had to stay closed. Those moments become part of your story, part of the evidence of God's faithfulness. They remind you that He is not just a God who opens doors no man can shut, but also a God who shuts doors no man can open. And sometimes the shutting is just as important as the opening because it keeps you aligned with His will. Everyone wants promotion, but very few are willing to embrace the preparation that makes promotion sustainable. We live in a culture that craves instant success, overnight recognition, and immediate elevation, but the kingdom of God does not function on shortcuts. Every promotion that comes from God is preceded by a season of preparation. That preparation may be long, it may be difficult, and it may feel hidden, but it is necessary. Without preparation, promotion will crush you instead of carrying you. God will never place you in a position you are not prepared to handle. He will not release you into your next level until He has refined you, tested you, and strengthened you in your current one. Preparation happens in hidden places. Before David ever fought Goliath, he fought lions and bears in the fields while no one was watching. Before he wore a crown, he carried a harp into Saul's palace. Before the prophet Samuel poured oil over his head, David was faithfully tending sheep, doing work that seemed insignificant but was actually training ground for leadership. The promotion to king was already written in God's plan, but the preparation had to take place in obscurity. Many people want to be seen on platforms, but they are not willing to serve in pastures. They want the applause of crowds, but despise the discipline of hidden seasons. Yet God uses the hidden seasons to develop the character, integrity, and resilience required for visible promotion. The pasture is not punishment, it is preparation. Preparation often comes disguised as difficulty. The very trials you want to escape are the tools God is using to shape you. Joseph's preparation for the palace came through betrayal, slavery, and prison. Each painful season developed qualities he would later need as a leader in Egypt. In Potiphar's house, he learned administration. In prison, he learned interpretation. Through betrayal, he learned endurance. Each stage of preparation looked like a setback, but in reality, it was equipping him with the wisdom, patience, and faith required to handle the promotion when it finally came. If Joseph had skipped any stage of preparation, he would not have had the capacity to sustain the weight of his assignment. Promotion without preparation leads to collapse, but promotion after preparation leads to lasting impact. Preparation also exposes weaknesses that need to be addressed before elevation. In seasons of preparation, God allows the pressure to reveal what is hidden inside you. He surfaces pride, impatience, fear, or insecurity so that He can deal with them before you reach the next level. It is far better to confront weaknesses in private than to have them destroy you in public. When God is preparing you, He will strip away what cannot go with you into the next season. That stripping feels uncomfortable. It feels like loss, like pruning, like subtraction, but it is actually God's mercy. He is removing what will hinder you so that when promotion comes, you are lighter, sharper, and more focused. The pruning is painful, but it is always purposeful. Preparation always involves testing. God will test your faithfulness in small things before He entrusts you with greater things. If you are not faithful with little, how can you be trusted with much? The promotion you are praying for may not have come yet, because God is watching how you handle the level you are in right now. Are you diligent even when no one notices? Do you show up with excellence even when the assignment seems beneath you? Do you serve with integrity when the task feels thankless? Every small test is connected to a larger assignment. How you handle this season will determine whether you are ready for the next one. Promotion is not a matter of desire. It is a matter of readiness. And readiness is proven in preparation. Preparation also shapes your perspective. In seasons of waiting, you learn how to see differently. You learn patience, you learn dependence, and you learn humility. Without preparation, promotion can inflate your ego. You start to believe the elevation is about you instead of about God's purpose. But when you've walked through preparation, you understand that the position is not a prize, but a platform to serve. You know that the doors open because of God's hand, not your own. Preparation keeps you grounded so that when promotion comes, you don't lose your humility in the spotlight. God will not elevate you to a place where pride will destroy you, so he uses preparation to keep your heart aligned before promotion arrives. Even Jesus underwent preparation before stepping fully into his public ministry. For 30 years, he lived in obscurity, working as a carpenter, submitting to earthly parents, quietly growing in wisdom and stature. Then, before launching his ministry, he spent 40 days in the wilderness, fasting and being tested by the enemy. Only after enduring that preparation did he begin teaching, healing, and performing miracles. If the Son of God himself submitted to a season of preparation before his promotion into public ministry, how much more must we? Preparation is not optional, it is essential. The wilderness, the pasture, the prison, the hidden years, these are all classrooms of preparation. And while they may feel like delays, they are actually accelerators. Every skill you acquire, every lesson you learn, every wound that heals, every prayer that deepens you is adding weight to your spiritual foundation. You may not see the connection now, but when the promotion comes, you will recognize that everything you endured was part of God's curriculum to make you ready. The very things you thought were setbacks will reveal themselves as setups. The very trials you thought were meaningless will show their value, and the very seasons you thought were wasted will prove to have been necessary chapters in your preparation. One of the hardest lessons for us to learn in our walk with God is that the plan we imagine is not always the plan God has designed. We fall in love with our own blueprints. We map out the steps, the timeline, the milestones, and we expect life to follow the script we wrote. And when things don't unfold according to that script, we panic, we question, and sometimes we even grow bitter. But the truth is that our security should never be in the plan itself, because plans can change. Opportunities may shift, people may walk away, seasons may close, doors may lock, but the planner, the one who holds all of time and eternity in his hands, never changes. Trusting the planner is greater than trusting the plan. If your faith is rooted in your plan, the moment it collapses, your faith will collapse with it. But if your faith is rooted in the planner, you can stand even when every detail looks uncertain, because you know the author has already written the end of your story. Trusting the planner requires surrender. Surrender is not easy for people who like control, and most of us do. We like to know what's next. We like to calculate risk. We like to feel safe. But walking with God is not about certainty of details. It is about certainty of direction. Abraham learned this when God called him to leave his father's house, his country, and everything familiar to go to a land I will show you. Notice that God didn't hand him a map. He didn't lay out the plan with specific coordinates. He simply gave him a word and a promise. Abraham had to decide if he would trust the planner enough to walk without knowing the full plan. That's where true faith lives. Faith does not demand to see the entire picture. It moves with confidence because it trusts the one who painted it. The challenge for many of us is that we confuse the plan with the promise. We think that the promise is tied to the way we imagined it would happen. We assume that the relationship we wanted was the way the promise would come, that the job we applied for was the channel of provision, that the city we dreamed about was the place of destiny. But the planner is not limited to the paths we predict. He may close one door and open another. He may reroute your journey through valleys you didn't expect. He may deliver the promise promise in a way you never imagined. If your faith is in the plan, you'll feel lost when it changes. But if your faith is in the planner, you'll realize that no matter which way the road turns, the destination is still secure because the one guiding you cannot fail. Trusting the planner also means accepting detours. Life rarely moves in straight lines. The Israelites could have traveled from Egypt to the Promised Land in a matter of days, but God took them the long way around through the wilderness. To them it looked like wasted time, but to God it was protection. He knew that if they encountered the Philistines too soon, they would lose heart and return to Egypt. So he redirected them, not to delay them, but to preserve them. The planner sees dangers you cannot see. He knows battles you are not yet ready to fight. He knows lessons you have not yet learned. So when he takes you on the scenic route instead of the shortcut, it is not cruelty, it is wisdom. Detours are often divine. They are the planner's way of ensuring you arrive not only at the right destination, but in the right condition to stay there. Another reason we must trust the planner is that his perspective is eternal while ours is temporary. We see the moment, he sees the timeline. We see the step, he sees the staircase. We see the pain, he sees the purpose. We see the loss, he sees the legacy. When you are confined to the present, it is easy to mistake a setback for a failure, a delay for a denial, or a hardship for abandonment. But the planner is always operating with the end in mind. What feels like devastation in this moment may prove to be direction in the long run. What feels like unanswered prayers may actually be God's greatest protection. Trusting him means believing that his perspective is higher than yours, even when it contradicts what you can see. Trusting the planner requires patience. And patience is not passive. It is active endurance, a steady confidence that waits without wavering. You may not understand why the plan changed, why the timeline extended, why the promise hasn't materialized yet, but trusting the planner means you don't give up when the process takes longer than expected. It means you hold on, not because the plan looks promising, but because the planner is faithful. His track record is flawless. He has never failed a single one of his children, and he will not start with you. If you can trust him with your salvation, you can trust him with your situation. If you can trust him with eternity, you can trust him with today. Even Jesus modeled what it looks like to trust the planner more than the plan. In Gethsemane, facing the agony of the cross, he prayed, "If it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." In his humanity, he acknowledged the pain of the plan, but in his divinity, he surrendered to the wisdom of the planner. That surrender brought salvation to the world. If he had clung to his own plan, the purpose would have been lost. Trusting the planner often requires surrendering the plan you had in mind, but the reward on the other side is always greater than what you could have orchestrated yourself. When you reach moments in life where nothing looks like what you thought it would, when the script you wrote has been torn apart, when the doors you depended on have shut, you will be faced with a choice. Either you cling to your plan and crumble under its collapse, or you cling to the planner and trust that he is still writing a story far beyond your understanding.